Sometimes the hardest thing God will ever ask you to do is nothing. Think about that for a moment. We live in a world that constantly tells us to push harder, fight longer, and prove ourselves at every turn. The culture celebrates hustle, grind, and endless effort. So when God whispers into your heart, leave it alone, it almost feels like failure. It feels like weakness, as if you're somehow giving up on the very thing you've invested your time, energy, and emotions into. But in reality, when God tells you to step back, it is not punishment, it is protection. It is His way of pulling you out of a situation that looks survivable to you, but could actually be destructive in the long run. Many of us have experienced moments when we knew deep inside that God was nudging us to let something go, but our hearts refused to obey. We told ourselves, if I just hold on a little longer, maybe it will change. Maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can make this work. But here's the truth. Not every battle you face is yours to fight, and not every burden you carry is yours to keep. There are situations where God has already declared the outcome, and no amount of striving will alter what He has ordained. The only thing you accomplish by resisting His instruction is prolonging your pain. When God says, leave it alone, He is often saving you from things you cannot see. Think about how much He knows that you don't. He sees motives hidden in people's hearts. He sees the consequences that will unfold years from now. He sees the way that one decision, that one relationship, that one pursuit could derail everything He has prepared for you. What feels like loss in the moment is actually His way of preserving your destiny. And yet, because we are so emotionally tied to the present, we confuse His protection with rejection. We assume He is withholding something from us, when in fact He is keeping something destructive away from us. The Bible gives us countless examples of this principle. Consider when God told the Israelites not to return to Egypt. They thought Egypt represented stability. They thought it was familiar, manageable, even though it was slavery. But God saw what they couldn't. He saw that going back would strip them of the future He promised. Or think of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He asked if the cup could pass, but ultimately He surrendered, leaving it alone so the will of the Father could be fulfilled. If Jesus Himself had to leave something in the hands of God, what makes us think we're supposed to grip tighter? Psychologically, this struggle runs deep because human beings are wired for control. We like to believe our effort determines our outcome, so when we're told to release something, it feels unnatural. But spiritually, leaving it alone is one of the greatest acts of faith. It's saying, God, I trust that your vision is bigger than mine. I believe that you see beyond the surface. I choose to let go, not because I'm weak, but because I'm wise enough to trust your strength over mine. That shift in mindset turns surrender into strength. Sometimes God's protection comes disguised as a closed door, a broken relationship, or an unfulfilled desire. We cry over it, we wrestle with it, but looking back, we often realize it was the very thing that saved us. The job we didn't get freed us for the career we were meant to build. The relationship that ended cleared the way for someone who could truly love us. The dream that died made room for a vision far greater than we imagined. At the time, it felt like devastation. Later, it revealed itself as divine redirection. What complicates this further is the voice of pride. Pride tells you that you're strong enough to fix what's broken. Pride convinces you that walking away is failure, when in truth, clinging to something outside of God's will is the real defeat. That's why learning to leave things alone is so transformative. It doesn't just shape your circumstances, it shapes your character. It develops humility, patience, and trust, qualities that prepare you for the blessings ahead. And let's be clear, leaving it alone doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you're indifferent. It means you've recognized your limits. It means you've chosen to hand the weight over to the one whose shoulders are broad enough to carry it. There's a difference between abandonment and surrender. Abandonment walks away in bitterness, but surrender walks away in trust, believing that God has something better. Some of you right now are holding on to situations that God has been nudging you to release. Maybe it's a toxic friendship, a career that no longer fits your purpose, or a fight to convince someone to see your worth. You've been exhausting yourself trying to make it work. But perhaps God is saying, leave it alone, because until you do, you'll never see what He has waiting on the other side. So here's the challenge. The next time you feel God whispering those words, don't resist, don't argue, don't prolong the pain. Trust him enough to step back, because the moment you release it is the moment you place it into his hands, and his hands will always hold it better than yours ever could. And this is the thought I want you to walk away with tonight when God says, leave it alone. It's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of his victory. When God tells you to leave something alone, it's often because he's about to do something you could never accomplish on your own. There are moments in life where your efforts, no matter how strong, how disciplined, or how determined, simply won't produce the outcome you're hoping for. And this is precisely where many of us stumble, because we've been trained to believe that persistence always pays off. If you push hard enough, if you fight long enough, if you refuse to give up, eventually the situation will bend in your favor. But the truth is, persistence in the wrong place can be just as destructive as giving up in the right place. There are some doors that no amount of persistence can open, because God never designed them for you in the first place. This is the paradox of faith. You're called to fight the good fight, but you're also called to discern when the fight isn't yours. And that discernment requires humility. It requires a willingness to admit that your wisdom is limited and that your perspective is incomplete. When God says, step back and leave it alone, he is often protecting you from wasting your strength on battles that were never meant to define your destiny. And if you ignore that instruction, you'll drain yourself in a place where victory is not only impossible, but also unnecessary. Think about how many times in Scripture God deliberately told his people not to interfere. When Israel stood at the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army pressing down behind them, God didn't tell them to build a bridge or start swimming. He said, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. In other words, this battle isn't about your strength, it's about my deliverance. Later in the wilderness, God instructed them not to fight the Moabites or the Ammonites because he had not given those lands to Israel. He was saying, that territory isn't yours, leave it alone. I've got a different inheritance set aside for you. Imagine if they had ignored him, they would have wasted time, energy, and lives chasing what was never theirs to possess. We often do the same thing. We exhaust ourselves chasing relationships that God has already ended. We fight for jobs or opportunities that don't align with our purpose. We wrestle with situations that were never designed to shape our future. And in doing so, we delay the very blessing God was preparing for us because our hands are too full of what we refuse to release. From a psychological perspective, this is deeply tied to our human fear of loss. We equate letting go with failure because we believe our value is connected to what we hold on to. The truth is, letting go is not failure, it's faith. It's acknowledging that what God has for you cannot be taken by another person, and what is not meant for you cannot be secured by your own effort. You can manipulate, you can strive, you can even convince yourself for a while that you're making progress. But if God has said, leave it alone, all you've done is waste energy on something that will never bear fruit. One of the most dangerous traps we fall into is thinking that God needs our help to accomplish his will. We say we trust him, but then we step in trying to force outcomes or control situations. But when God says to leave it alone, it's not because he's indifferent, it's because he's already working behind the scenes in a way you cannot see. The very act of stepping back creates space for him to move. Your silence, your stillness, your surrender, these are not signs of inactivity. They are acts of obedience that open the door for divine activity. And let me press this point a little deeper. Some of the hardest battles to walk away from are not the external ones, but the internal ones. Sometimes God is telling you to leave alone the need to always be right. Sometimes he's telling you to leave alone the habit of replaying past hurts, or the obsession with controlling how others perceive you. These internal struggles often drain us more than the external ones. And when God says, leave it alone, he's also inviting you into freedom from the weight you've been carrying in your own mind. It takes courage to release something, especially when it's been a part of your identity. That toxic relationship may have defined your past, but it doesn't have to dictate your future. That failed opportunity may have shaped your disappointment, but it doesn't have to shape your destiny. When you leave it alone, you're not losing. You're making room. You're clearing space in your heart and your life for what God has prepared next. This is why obedience is so critical. Obedience is not always about doing more. Sometimes it's about doing less. Sometimes it's about the restraint to step back when everything in you wants to step forward. And that restraint is a form of wisdom. It's a declaration that you believe God knows better, sees further, and loves deeper than you can possibly comprehend. So let me leave you with this. The next time God whispers, leave it alone. Don't interpret it as abandonment. Interpret it as alignment. He is aligning your life with His purpose, even if it doesn't make sense in the moment. And the peace you've been searching for will come not when you finally gain control, but when you finally surrender it. Here's the closing thought. Leaving it alone doesn't mean you've lost. It means you've trusted. And trust in God will never leave you empty. It will always lead you to something greater than what you had the strength to hold on to.